The consistency of my uploads is roughly equal to that of the stool of a man who eats nothing but Chipotle. This is the Sega Saturn, Sega's second to last game console, and their greatest 2D powerhouse. The Saturn was released in November of 1994 in Japan, but the release of the Saturn in America is absolutely bizarre. It was originally announced in March 1995 that it would hit store shelves on September 2nd, but Sega of Japan wanted it to be out before its PlayStation. Because of this, at the first E3 event on May 11, it was announced that 30,000 Sega Saturns were already on their way to store shelves to be released immediately. Surprise! Now, if you thought that the Xbox One was expensive at launch with its $500 price tag, the Sega Saturn's launch price, adjusted for inflation, was a wallet-busting, purse-popping, savings-draining $625. This was made even worse by the fact that the PlayStation launched for nearly $150 less. And while the PlayStation and Nintendo 64 focused on 3D graphics, Sega thought that 2D would still hold out, and as you can guess, this was incorrect. The Saturn was already off to a shaky start, and then, only 2 years in, its fate was sealed. When asked about Sega's future, VP Bernie Stoller replied, "The Saturn is not our future." What a fupping dingleberry. Now, some people like to use Bernie as a scapegoat. That's Karibo. There we go. Some people like to use Bernie as a scapegoat for the Saturn's failure, when in reality his stupid remark was pretty much just the icing on the cake. So there's an abridged history to the Sega Saturn, and now let's take a look at the console itself. The Sega Saturn is a CD-based console from the 5th generation of game consoles. You want to talk specs? Alright, let's talk specs. The Sega Saturn had a total of 8 processors, which made it hard to program for. The Saturn utilizes 2 Hitachi SH2 microprocessors, clocked at 28.6 MHz, and capable of 56 MIPS. The system contains a Motorola 68EC000 running at 11.3 MHz as a sound controller, a custom sound processor, Yamaha FH1 DSP, running at 22.6 MHz, capable of up to 32 sound channels with both FM synthesis and 16-bit PCM sampling at a maximum rate of 44.1 kHz. And 2 video display processors. The VDP1, which handles sprite textures and polygons, and VDP2, it handles the backgrounds. Its double-speed CD-ROM drive is controllable with good pairs of Pachi SQ1 processor to reduce load time. The Saturn System Control Unit, or SHU, controls all buttons and functions as a co-processor of the SH2 CPU as an internal DSP running at 14.3 MHz. Never again. Though the Saturn is a CD system, it actually includes a cartridge port behind the disc tray. This is used for ROM expansion and save cards, which will, well, they expand your ROM and your save space. Here's what you'll want to do if you buy a Saturn, however. Just go to eBay and buy one of these. Take the cart and plug it in the slot. There you go. Now you have the max amount of RAM, you can use cheats, and you can play imports. You're welcome. There are 2 main Sega Saturn controllers, the Model 1 and the Model 2. The Model 2 is the one that all Japanese Saturns have, albeit in the Japanese color scheme. The US got the Model 2 controller after the Model 2 Saturn, which was a minor cosmetic and cost-saving redesign. The Model 1 controller was shipped with the original Saturn only in the US, and it was larger than the Model 2 controller to fit fat American sausage fingers. Sausage fingers. The Model 2 controller is far better, and it's arguably the greatest game controller ever made. Seriously, that thing is stinking magical. Now, Saturn games in the US come in these weird elongated jewel cases, which are made from apparently the most fragile material on Earth because it is almost impossible to find a mint US Saturn game due to these boxes. Worst of all, because of their size, if the disc comes loose in the box, it can become scratched beyond repair, which is why Sega included these little foam inserts that are always missing. Sega was much more sensible in Japan. It shipped games in regular CD cases, most of which have an English translation of the title on one side. So let's go ahead and pop some games in and see what all the hype from the Sega Saturn is about. First up, probably the most well-known Saturn title, Nights in the Dreams. And this game is weird. The first time you play this game, you will get an F, and it may be tempting to simply quit the game, but if you keep trying, you will eventually get the hang of the controls. The game is supposed to be easier if you have the Saturn 3D controller, which is the precursor to the Dreamcast controller, but I don't have one, so I have to attempt to use the Model 2 controller. If you get a Saturn, and you really should, you'll have to pick up this game. It's a classic. The long box version, like I have, is very rare, so I recommend just finding the CD case copy for about half the price. Next we have In the Hunt, which just might be my favorite video game of all time. This game was developed by the team that went on to create Metal Slug, and you can really tell with the art style. In the Hunt started life as an arcade game, and the Saturn version is not only the best console version, but managed to surpass even the arcade version in quality. Now you may notice some slowdown as I play this, but that's only because my copy of the game is scratched, and therefore hates the action replay, so I don't get to use the extra RAM. Even without the RAM card though, this frantic submarine shooter is excellent. Also, did I mention, it is hard. Almost impossibly hard. It makes me yearn for the difficulty of Metal Slug, which seems like a cakewalk in comparison to this game. The US version has gotten really expensive, like almost $100 by this point, but the Japanese version is slightly more affordable alternative if you have an action replay to play imports.
Lock and load, little lizard.
Dana Gold the Lizard, or Gex as some call it, is an okay platform for your Saturn. Everything about the game is okay. The control is okay. The music is okay. The level design's okay. The difficulty is okay. I suppose the graphics are pretty nice. So overall, I mean, you could do a lot worse than... Oh, wait a minute. Where's the save button? Is there not a... No, this is the 5th generation of game consoles. They had saving down the 3rd generation. There has to be something I'm missing here. Alright, let me just Google it. Oh. Okay. I see.
It's not okay.
Let's cap off this portion of the video with the Japan exclusive. This game helped kick off the entire bullet hell genre. You have 2 firing modes in Danpachi. Death and Death. The goal of Danpachi is to punish everything that moves for so much as daring to be alive in the general vicinity of your death lasers. You do this by blowing them up with said death lasers. Playing this game, even on easy, is like shooting a needle of adrenaline directly into your already engorged adrenal glands, then driving a Ferrari made out of fire and lava into the sun while drinking espresso without getting injured on a Tuesday evening. Don't worry though, the Unlimited continues, so even the most novice of players can see the end of this game. When old people say video games and scowl, this is what they picture. This game is pure madness, and it is beautiful. Fun fact, the sequel, Dodonpachi, is even more insane. Yeah! So there you have it, the Sega Saturn. The Saturn is hands down the best 5th generation system for 2D games. It has a great library, especially for fighting game fans, since Capcom released a myriad of great titles in the system. While the N64 and PlayStation 1 surpassed it in 3D gameplay, the Saturn's beautiful 2D visuals have a unique appeal all their own. So if you're still straddling the fence, is the Saturn any good?